Marcus Sterling stood in the marble foyer of Sterling Industries, the empire his father built, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as his wife Elena and her frail mother trudged through the blizzard, their silhouettes disappearing into the swirling snow he just forced them into. What this entitled CEO didn't know as he slammed that mahogany door was that the company he inherited from his father, the one he believed was his birthright, the one he just used as leverage to humiliate his wife, had never actually been his at all. 5 years earlier, when Marcus's father lay dying, he'd made a choice that would change everything. He'd transferred every single share of Sterling Industries into Elena's name, the daughter-in-law he cherished, the woman who'd cared for him when his own son was too busy climbing social ladders. But Elena had kept this inheritance secret, hidden in a lawyer's vault, waiting for what? For the right moment for love to prevail. As Marcus poured himself a victory scotch in his father's old office, he had no idea that the woman freezing in that December storm held the power to destroy him with a single signature. What had his father seen in Elena that made him trust her with his entire legacy? Why had Elena endured years of Marcus' cruelty while sitting on the keys to his kingdom? And what would she do now that he'd pushed her and her dying mother out into the snow like they were nothing? The bitter December wind cut through Elena's coat as she supported her mother's trembling frame, their feet crunching through fresh snow that was already ankle-deep. Behind them, the Sterling mansion blazed with warm light, a fortress of wealth and privilege that had once been her home. Elena's mother, Patricia, coughed violently, her lungs rattling with the pneumonia that had kept her bedridden for weeks. Just an hour ago, they'd been inside that warmth. Just an hour ago, Marcus had been a different kind of cruel. Elena remembered the exact moment everything shattered. She'd been in the kitchen preparing her mother's medication when Marcus walked in with Vivian Blackwell draped on his arm like an expensive accessory. Vivian, his executive assistant, his mistress for the past 18 months, though Elena had known for far longer. The woman was everything Elena wasn't. Tall, angular, with the kind of sharp beauty that cut rather than comforted. Where Elena's body had grown soft and round over their 10-year marriage, where her curves spoke of comfort food eaten alone while Marcus worked late, Vivian was all hard edges and discipline. Marcus had looked at Elena with something worse than hatred. He looked at her with disgust. The papers he'd thrown on the counter were divorce documents already signed on his end, already processed through his family's lawyers. But it was what he said next that had frozen Elena's blood colder than any winter storm. He told her that their joint account, the one with $300,000 they'd been saving, the one that held her mother's medical fund, had been emptied. He'd taken it all, every cent. The money Elena's mother had contributed from selling her own home to help with the down payment on the mansion. The money Elena had saved from her years working as a hospital administrator before Marcus convinced her to quit. All of it gone, transferred into an account Vivian's name was also on. Then Vivian had stepped forward, her Louboutin heels clicking on the marble floor like gunshots. And she'd done something that would haunt Elena forever. She'd spat directly in Elena's face, the saliva sliding down Elena's cheek as Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. That laugh echoed in Elena's mind now as she guided her mother toward the street, looking for her old car that Marcus had probably had towed by now. That laugh was the sound of 10 years dissolving, of promises made in a small chapel where Marcus's father had cried tears of joy, of nights when Elena had believed love could survive anything. She'd been wrong. Marcus had never loved her. His father had tried to warn her in those final days when Elena had sat by the old man's bedside, reading to him, helping him eat, being the daughter he'd always wanted. Thomas Sterling had been more of a father to Elena than her own had ever been. Her biological father had abandoned Patricia when Elena was 7, leaving them in a 2-bedroom apartment in Newark with nothing but debt and broken promises. Thomas had seen something in Elena when Marcus first brought her home. Something good and pure that his son had been attracted to before success and ambition had poisoned him. In those final weeks of his life, Thomas had made arrangements. He'd called his personal attorney, Gregory Hutchkins, to his bedside. Elena had been there thinking nothing of it, assuming the old man was simply updating his will. She'd stepped out to give them privacy, but Thomas had called her back in. What he told her that day had seemed impossible. A fever dream from a dying man who loved her too much. Thomas Sterling was transferring complete ownership of Sterling Industries to Elena, not to Marcus, to her. Every share, every asset, every subsidiary company, the entire empire worth $800 million. Elena had refused at first, her hands shaking as she tried to push the papers away. This was Marcus' inheritance, his birthright, the company his father had built from nothing. But Thomas had gripped her hand with surprising strength for a man so close to death, his eyes fierce and clear.